you will probably already have some idea about the kind of damage that could be caused by a nuclear attack on this island. And you may already know a little about the ways and means with which the Civil Defense Corps, along with the other services, propose to meet this threat. Now, between the complex structure of civil defense control, with all its highly trained resources, and the mass population of this country, untrained and uninformed, there is one vital link: the civil defense warden. Without that link, effective control would be impossible. Life-saving teams would not be deployed to the best advantage, and chaos would ensue. With his local knowledge of people, of facts and figures about his post area, and a sound understanding of the problems involved, the warden would be intensely active in times of war and in that tension-laden period of emergency that might precede it. There would be no time for him then to acquire his specialist knowledge. He must be fully trained during the days of peace, while there's still time to do so. The warden's duties are very exacting, very arduous, and very varied. Many thousands of lives might rest in his hands. His is a responsibility which must be understood by all and never be taken for granted. Now, you who have volunteered but have not yet made your choice of section, or you who have already made it, would be well advised to consider the training, the peacetime training that lies before you. However, no matter how much training a warden receives, he would not be able to carry out his task effectively unless he has an intimate and detailed knowledge of the area for which he is responsible. You will therefore be asked to get to know the shortest and quickest routes from point to point, to find your way about by day or night, or no matter how badly damaged and unrecognizable your locality may be after a nuclear attack. As part of your training, you must therefore get to know your area like the back of your hand, to know which buildings are likely to stand up best to the effects of blast, and those that could make good communal refuges against fallout. You should observe where the greatest fire risks lie, and which buildings could easily be turned into emergency rest or feeding centers. It might be necessary, in the event of a nuclear attack, for the population in your area to be moved to a district uncontaminated by fallout. You should therefore find out how many private motor coaches and other transport there is in your area which could be made available for clearance purposes in an emergency, and whether there are any bridges with low headroom which might prevent the use of double-decker buses in a clearance operation. You will have to decide which roads would be likely to remain open, which bridges can take the weight of heavy appliances should it be necessary, and if the approaches to and from a bridge would be likely to be blocked to mobile forces after a burst. You must know how to get quickly to your sector post so that you can report there if your telephone is out of action, where your street leaders live, and whether there are any industrial civil defense units in your area. You should also know where the nearest police station is, who is the local doctor, and where the district nurse is to be found. During the precautionary period that might precede a state of national emergency, and only then, the warden would have to complete a household register. For example, you would have to find out who lives at number 18, how many are there still in there, are there any handicapped or sick people or children living there, have they got a car, and where is their refuge room. This business of knowing your area cannot be taken lightly. Very many lives might depend on your having the correct information at the right time. In the last war, World War II, many people survived only because the wardens knew exactly where they had taken refuge or shelter.
That's it then. They've put one on Bristol.
I never thought it would happen.
Is everyone okay? Well, till I get further instructions, I'm going to keep you all in here. And in case we have to open up quickly, let's decide now what we're going to do. Mrs. Levis, I want you to be in charge of first aid. And you better keep Anne with you. And you too, I think. Now, clothing. You two can cope with that all right, can't you? And Mary, you'll be in charge of feeding, of course, with Mrs. Ford in the kitchen. And Frank, I think you're going to leave the rest of the staff to help you with the billeting.
Yes, Mrs. Hughes will work with me as my assistant. And I want you to look after the billeting guides when we get them.
Well, we ought to be able to get more people in to help you, from the street parties and so on. Well, I think that's about... Mrs. Levis, look after Anne, will you?
Sorry.
But there's just one more thing. From now on, this is going to be one of our biggest problems. Most of us have been training for this for years, but I don't think any of us really believed it could really happen. Well, in a few hours, we're going to be swamped with people who've just walked out of hell. If a panic starts, it's going to spread, like wildfire, because that's what panic's like. So whatever fears we may have, we better face them now, clearly. Right? Well, it's 4:15. Better make ourselves as comfortable as possible. Maybe some time before the all-clear goes. Well, we better start by getting the camp beds out.
He would then return to his post and make his report. To save time, to make sure that no points are overlooked, and to ensure that reports conform to the same sequence, the warden will be taught the reporting code. He will also be taught the 24-hour clock, the NATO phonetic alphabet, and the list of abbreviations to be used in connection with reporting. When life-saving teams arrived in the warden's area, they would depend on him for getting instant and correct information. In this respect, he will be taught to brief others. It might be an ambulance or first aid officer or a rescue officer sent in to help, needing accurate particulars to help them carry out their task, warning them of any local hazards, telling them of the most suitable location for ambulance loading points, and advising them of the present dose rate in the vicinity. In more rural areas, or in towns or cities less likely to be attacked, the warden will be instructed in the means of warning the public against entering the zones of varying radiation intensity affected by radioactive fallout alone. He will be taught the drill for starting limited release of the public from their homes after the necessary initial period spent in refuge is over. Warning signs would have to be posted. His street leaders would have to be briefed so that the public in his area were kept informed of the situation and told how long they could stay in the open if they had to go out. And he might have to assist the local food organization in distributing essential food supplies. If his post was in a reception area, he would be called upon to guide and advise people who had been moved out from places more severely affected by fallout. In this, he will learn to cooperate, for example, with the welfare section and the police. But wherever his post may be, most important of all are his duties towards the public, the householders, the individual men and women who live around him. In time of emergency, he would be their main source of information and their guide. He is the one person, the only person apart from the police, to whom they would be instructed to turn for help and advice. They would put their trust and their lives in his hands. This quality of leadership, which is expected from the wearer of a warden's uniform, is perhaps the most difficult to teach. It is for this reason that the warden must be a man who is fully prepared to accept this great responsibility and who would not shirk it if the time came. Now, you must never forget that the road leading to the fully trained warden is not an easy one. With the lack of urgency that is inherent in these happy days of peace, that road may sometimes seem endless and lacking in wayside drama. But if we are to survive a nuclear war, and survive it we can and must, then we have no choice but to prepare and plan through the medium of a highly trained, efficient, and responsible Warden Section.